how many times in human history have you been at the end of the interglacial with a societal collapse? There's a lot of changes afoot right now, and I think we're all feeling it, and a lot of people are starting to attune to it, the once in a million year event that we're witness to at this moment here. I'm very thankful to be alive.
There's a lot to look forward to.
Truly. We're going to rebuild the society.
Well, hopefully we build back better.
Oh, how dare you use those bees. We're starting to grow hazelnut this year. I know it'll be a little bit, but looking at the hazelnuts and the different types, I've got all these different types of raspberries now, the yellow raspberries and the black raspberries, this sort of thing. Like fruits and veggies that are off, and the currants, also the pink champagne currants. We started to plant to get more, like fruit yield with some higher value on it. People don't have a lot of this, so it's more tradables. And you can also squeeze them into juices and then ferment that or have fruit juices, whatever. But the more things that you can think of that have a higher value for tradability versus just an ear of corn, everybody's got sweet corn, but not a lot of people have fruit. And I've noticed that in terms of like tradability on foodstuffs, there's a lot of fruit lacking. You might have enough for your family just to grow some raspberry bushes in the back there. But in terms of overproducing, where you could actually have like an abundant crop of then tradable for somebody else, fruit, not that forthcoming. I don't know, Charlie, if you see around where you are, maybe it's more of a fruit producing area, but out here in East Tennessee, mainly cattle, mainly grains, chicken, that sort of thing. But you just don't have a lot of major fruit producers like you would say in Washington with the apples, or others down in Georgia with the peaches and whatnot. So,
well, a massive amount of our fruit production actually comes from Florida, Georgia, and then California. If you look at the amount of fruit and vegetable production that comes out of California and then is shipped across the United States, it's pretty massive. And that's why the drought conditions in California are such a big deal. If you're talking entire orchards of trees, nut trees, fruit trees that have just been wiped out over the past 2 years. There were some last year, there were more this year. I think it's going to have a very big impact everywhere else. And it's not that you can't grow fruit anywhere else. In years past, you could get it at the grocery store so inexpensively, it hasn't really been worth people's time to grow something that they have to go through and pick by hand. The other issue I think we're facing with that is just the border is such a mess that farmers can't get workers across the border. It's one thing when you've got things under control and there's a system in place, but when you've got this backup at the border, I did an interview with an onion farmer last year. They would bring guys up to work because let's face it, a lot of Americans don't want the job of hand picking asparagus or, onions. Even at, I think, the rates that they were paying back then, it was $19-20 an hour for that type of work. So they would bring some guys up. It would take them a month and a half to get them across the border. By then, the crop is lost. We've seen some of that with the border situation. And then when you add on top of that, the drought situations and just the massive culling of long-term crops, fruit prices, and well, heck, you've probably seen it at the grocery store. Fruit prices are already way up compared to where they used to be. The cost of this stuff is getting astronomical. So that may spur people to start growing some fruits, but it's also difficult. Where you and I are, it's a very humid environment, and humidity isn't always easy on those crops. You look at a drier environment, if you have water that you can put onto the roots of those fruit trees, you can grow a lot of fruit without having to face the issues of mold and other things. If you try and do that out on the East Coast, you may have more natural moisture, but now you've got funguses and stuff to contend with on the actual trees. So on a mass scale production, it is a bit more challenging.
Yeah, I could say that with the windsap apples this year. They skins aren't looking rosy red with a yellowish tinge in them. It's more dusty brown, a little bit of black spot in there. You can only put so much copper up into the leaves with a sprayer. That's sort of I would say organic-ish way to go versus what a commercial would do. And they just come in and blast everything with chemical in and out of there. But again, it's about wild foraging. I'm getting really in tune with, what's edible during the different seasons and coming in and checking out the persimmons and the muscadines and the crab apples and the different pears and apples that are already, 10-year-old trees that are growing around here that nobody ever takes care of. And just, we planted our own orchard out here, finally got a little bit of cherry on it this year. But Japanese beetles were voracious this year. And there are problems with growing fruit trees. Like we struggled with the plums because they just were eaten so heavily that, and even the what was out there, the elderberries, we had these stink bugs and all these other things were coming in to eat on the flowers, Japanese beetles. And even after it did come to fruit, stink bugs were in there sucking those fruit dry all the time. And we came out supposed to get like 5 to 15 pounds per plant. We were lucky if we got a pound per plant after all the insect damage, because I wasn't on it enough. Because here I am trying to work the stuff, have a living also to be able to pay for all this. But at the same time, once or twice a day to go check for insect pests across a couple acres of trees out there, and then spray at the same time and get everything ready. And I try not to go too chemical, soap and water for the Japanese beetles, copper, again, and that sort of thing. But you know how it is, man, a lot of land is harder to take care of, especially if you have a full-time job. If I was just out there 8 or 10 hours a day, just working out on the land, and that was my, bread and butter versus like what you do also, there's secondary, I don't know. More people would be very helpful to have out here to do those tasks, but in the real world, it is what it is.
Yeah. Do you have honeybees?
We do, but they froze last year. I had a full 3 hive die off because maybe you experienced this too. It was near freezing, and then it jumped up to like over 70 degrees for like 3 days, and then it went back down to like 14 Fahrenheit. It was one of those really weird anomalies. Well, the bees had come out, and once the temperatures dropped back down, they didn't propolis themselves in good enough. And I should have taken out big blankets and put over the hives, but it didn't even register. I didn't even think about that because the hives were pretty large and they survived through the whole winter already. They were in there, and I shrunk them down. I took the supers off the top and really squeezed them in there so they could self-heat. But I lost them all. They all froze, a bunch of little frozen corpses at the bottom. They're really terrible. I lost all my hives last year.
Oh man,
I'm getting choked up.
Hey, I love bees.
Me too.
The reason why I asked is it makes a big difference with cross pollination to have your own bees on your property, because I would see honeybees every now and then, or if the magnolias were in bloom, they'd come swarming. But since we've had honeybees on our property, you see them every day. They're out there, they're doing work every day. But
oh no, just the time involved in trying to keep your basic food growing, and those pests are so voracious. And I knew something was going to be unusual this year in terms of like cold winter, because the Japanese beetles were out of sight. Japanese beetle, I know Japanese, they're around all the time. But this was so far beyond anything normal, where they were just like covering a tree where you'd shake it, like hundreds, thousands would come down out of a single tree. And I'm like, whoa, this is so far out of the normal. So I was asking, around, is this normal? They're like, no, this is super crazy this year for the Japanese beetles. So I'm wondering, what is overboard? Same with the stink bugs. There's like way more than the normal. So what's going on in terms of pests coming out in the carpenter bees this year were like, piranhas. You couldn't get rid of them, and they were extra voracious on the wood and digging deeper. And I don't know, something has signaled nature that come out to your ultimate right now, do as much as you can, stock up as much as you can for this winter, because it's going to be outrageously cold, because nature's behaving in that way in terms of numbers and damage that has not been seen in generation.
Nature has a way of working within itself. It has for thousands of years. But if you look at the areas that we're in, we're in the southeast, and with a La Nina event, last winter was a little bit warmer than it would typically be, being La Nina, or we had more favorable conditions for rodent populations and insect populations to reproduce. And the other thing is, when you come out of a period, and I don't know if you've read studies on this, but the 11-year solar cycle, when you go into periods of low solar radiation, it actually impacts, or it actually improves the reproduction ability of smaller organisms. So we just came out of solar minimum a little over a year ago, and then now you're seeing some of these cycles play out, and I'm sure it will get harder for them as we get into some colder winters, and then we'll go back to some times. But I mean, if you think about it, what their role is in nature is to kind of clean things up. So it's that, it's just unfortunately the things that they're cleaning up are the things we want to eat.
And the ever forever battle that has always been this man against insect.
Yeah.
The grasshopper. Yeah. So hopefully, we as a species on this planet, I wonder, like you referenced that cyclic activity of insects. I'm wondering if there's also this cyclic activity of human civilization built into this. Because now looking at all the research that was done with how intense this grand solar minimum will be, knowing that we're stepping down into cooling, heading out of the interglacial here eventually, is the next step down in cooling going to be significantly more than people anticipated, because we are at the end of this, once in 100,000 year period. It's 10,000 years of warmth, and actually it's a little bit longer this time than it would have been on the normal. Looking back over the last 2 million years, the one we sit in currently is the longest that they've recorded in the last 2 million years. So there's a lot of, if it's insects doing the thing or if it's humanity doing its thing, it's all cyclical, and our planet's mainly locked in ice for 90,000 years out of the 100,000 years. So I don't know. There's a lot of different variables at play that are so far beyond us in terms of not just our own star and our little tiny planet next to the star, but what about all these other, stars within our galaxy, and the changes that are being seen across the planets and across the star systems that are changing color spectrum that they've seen. Some of them vanish completely as the Birkeland current cut down its flow. And at least on the optical side of things, it looked like they vanished. One area of space that had 1,800 stars appeared to vanish, and then they started to reglow again. Well, what's the mechanism for that on top of things? So, as we look down in our daily lives and our yearly lives and monthly dailies, going out into a wider perspective of getting off this earth and looking out into the heavens itself, there's other signs out there saying we are coming into a very special period at this moment. And perhaps those that have greater knowledge of cycles on the longer term are also building this into their plans. And that's why the world we see around us makes a little more sense if you look at it in that wider landscape versus, oh, poor little me or poor little our world. There's a lot of changes afoot right now, and I think we're all feeling it, and a lot of people are starting to attune to it, that the frequency field is changing, magnetic field's changing. So the way we perceive reality is going to change also. And I think it's all just, adding up into a very interesting package. And I'm very thankful I'm alive to be able to witness this, live through it, and experience this change that hasn't been seen in such a long time, 100,000 years of time. And we're seeing it right now, stepping through the end of the interglacial. And how many times in human history have you been at the end of the interglacial with a societal collapse? And you just, millions of the once in a million year event that we're witness to at this moment here. So I'm very thankful to be alive.
Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, there is. Truly. I mean, we're going to rebuild the society. The people who live through this and come out the other side are going to be the ones who had the ingenuity and the collective spirit, along with those with the same like minds, belief system, core value, that stuck together as a unit to ride through this. That will be the new seeds of the world coming out on the end of this.
Well, hopefully we build back better.
Oh, how dare you use those BBBs.